going up on Facebook. No.
Okay. Got your description in there?
Yeah, got everything here, I think. Okay. And so we are live, and we're waiting for People's Internet Radio to kick in before I start talking much. This,
You've got 20 seconds left.
Well, can you start me early?
Sure. Okay, you're on in 2 and 1.
Cool. Hello, good morning, afternoon, or evening, my friends, depending on where you're at. I'm Emily Windsor Craig, and this is History Reset. It's 1 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time on October the 3rd, 2020. History Reset is brought to you each Saturday to bring valuable information to the public that corporate media refuse to divulge. This program is a public service, but please donate to People's Internet Radio to keep the people's truth coming at you without commercial adverts. Today's topic in History Reset is staying skeptical in a treacherous world, but not getting fatalistic. And I thought I'd start today. This is something I've never done before. I actually give an introduction to what I'm about to talk about. Hi, Felicity. I generally speak from a point of view that I learned about when I started researching my alleged father, King Edward VIII of England. Okay. And I read his autobiography, and I read the other biographies, and I looked at his interests and the span of his interests. And what that involved was the church and education and business and health, the whole spectrum of social connections, right? And he was brought up by a couple of evangelical Christian mentor tutors. I forget their names, but they belonged to the old Christian set that is typified by a certain book, The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. And today we would call this the modern charismatic movement, in which Christianity and the church is a day-by-day, step-by-step progression through experiences and behaviors to learn how to do it the right way according to Jesus. Okay. And John Bunyan lived in the 1600s from 1620 something to 1688. And so his very popular books formed the social basis for the 1689 Bill of Rights in England, okay, and the 1703 settlement, okay. John Bunyan's sense of morality and ethics is what was in operation popularly during the time, and especially in the 1700s, when the United States was formed, when the Revolutionary War occurred, and the Declaration of Independence, and then the common law Constitution. So that ethic has a lot to do with the constitutionalist movement in the United States today, the people who want to accept and return to that morality. Now, why are they fussing about the morality of our world now? That's because imperial globalism contains and embodies a different ethic, right? And if you look at the globalist leaders of the church, namely the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury, they have embraced the ecumenical reach of one world religion. Okay. And one world religion contains Islam, and Islam's holy book, the Quran, contains some behavioral practices that do not exist in the Pilgrim's Progress. Okay. And those practices are taqiyya, which is a form of treachery or lying, jizya, which is the protection tax bracket, jihad, which is a form of sedition to take down whatever country you happen to be in, and blasphemy, which is the silencing of anyone who speaks out of turn or out of line with the current official version. And so the churches have lined up with the all one religion and all one ethos that also encompasses the uniform commercial code, maritime admiralty, in which treachery, protection, tax, sedition, secrecy, and blasphemy are all just business, baby. All right. So the church and the state and the education system have all aligned with the ancient imperial modality of governance, which is to say, there's an oligarchy that rules over everybody else. And they rule by rule and not by common law, not by laws of the land. All right. So what I've put up for my friends at Facebook right away is all of the links to all of the works that I'm referring to today. And I'm referring to the traditional American culture as being part of that Christian Pilgrim's Progress, which encompasses the day-to-day exercise of morals and ethics to cause no harm, to speak the truth, no treachery, to deal honestly with people, sincerely, no protection rackets, to obey the leaders of the land who are legitimate, and to avoid secrecy in order to keep the government honest, and to simply allow freedom of speech, because blasphemy is a violation. It creates a violation out of freedom of speech. All right. So the first book I'm referring you to is The Pilgrim's Progress, the Dover Thrift Edition, which you can get cheap on Amazon. Next, Education versus Wisdom. And for that book, I'm referring you to Rotten to the Common Core by Joseph Farrell and Gary Lawrence, but with an introduction by Catherine Austin Fitz. And she gives an interesting introduction to modern pedagogy that those of us who are trusting Christians never even considered. I was and am deeply concerned, this is her page 8, about how invasive digital systems have become in all aspects of our lives and economy. This includes the use of entrainment and other mind control technologies delivered by media and telecommunications. It also includes surveillance and the invasion of privacy documented by numerous NSA whistleblowers and Edward Snowden. Whatever they are, digital information systems are not to be trusted when it comes to both children and adults. Federal mandates are requiring that healthcare records be digitized, while the Affordable Health Care Act is essentially shifting healthcare financial flows into corporate hands, profiteering. Digitization of records and standardization of treatment will permit more than $1 trillion in labor costs to be squeezed out of the healthcare sector. This has produced quite a windfall for corporate equities, as healthcare has led the US stock market to outperform global markets for several years. The same process is underway with the mandating of the Common Core curriculum and standardized testing in grades K through 12. This begins the re-engineering of the education process that will significantly reduce the need for and the authority of teachers. Okay, so mechanization has taken over the schools and removed the sovereignty or the dominion or the authority of the teacher and has placed learning in the lap of the individual child at the mercy of the keyboard and the computer monitor. Now, this is not how schooling was done back when the Constitution was crafted. Indeed, in those days and in the 18th and 19th centuries, the way children were educated were in one-room schoolhouses where one teacher had authority over 20 or 30 children, ages from about 16 down to 6 or 7. And the older children taught the younger children so that everybody was engaged in the Pilgrim's Progress of learning how to behave and what was lawful and what were the processes and the laws of causes and effects, the way we solve problems. Okay. And so the Common Core, I've looked at some of their lessons and their lists of abstract definitions that the children must memorize, but they are not being taught how to solve. They can't, they expect to use calculators. They don't know how to do arithmetic in their heads, okay? They're having trouble telling the time off of an analog clock. Our children are not being taught the skills they need to solve problems. And that's what has just about driven me up the wall, because I was a teacher in trade school, and we had to teach people how to work on equipment. They had to know how to read, they had to know how to write, they had to know how to measure. And those skills were often lacking because the lower grades did not provide them. So wisdom is not what is being taught in our nation's schools. And the Common Core, which is really the communist core curriculum, because it teaches ideals without the methods to reach those ideals, is what's going on. Now, I've mentioned to you many years back in the 40s and 50s, I had an uncle, Eugene Dennis, former General Secretary of the Communist Party USA. I've got his book here. And he was convicted under the Smith Act and sent to Leavenworth Prison, not because he had committed a crime, but for thought crimes. The Smith Act, formerly Alien Registration Act of 1940, U.S. federal law passed in 1940, made it a criminal offense to advocate the violent overthrow of the government or to organize or be a member of any group or society devoted to such advocacy. Antifa comes to mind, and its connection to Black Lives Matter and to George Soros and to, for instance, the Frankfurt School. You know, these leftists have taken over academia. I went to UC Berkeley in 1960, and the leftists were already there. And so I thought today, because most people don't have time to bother with this stuff, I would point out to you what the leftists are actually teaching to college students, university students today in their sociology courses, okay? The 11-point plan of the Frankfurt School, which is one of the leftist points of view. 1, the creation of racism offenses. 2, continual change to create confusion. 3, the teaching of sex and homosexuality to children. 4, the undermining of schools and teachers' authority. In other words, getting into rule baiting systems. 5, huge immigration to destroy identity. 6, the promotion of excessive drinking and weed. Okay. 7, the emptying of churches. 8, an unreliable legal system with bias against victims of crime. Have you seen that? Yeah. 9, dependency on the state or state benefits. 10, control and dumbing down of media. 11, encouraging the breakdown of the family. Now, does this comprise the advocacy of the overthrow of the government? Of course it does. Is it being prosecuted by the Department of Justice? No. Okay, so let's look at Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. Rule 1. Power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. Rule 2. Never go outside the expertise of your people. In other words, don't learn anything. 3. Whenever possible, go outside the expertise of the enemy. 4. Make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. 5. Ridicule is man's most potent weapon. 6. A good tactic is one your people enjoy. That's fun. 7. A tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. 8. Keep the pressure on, never let up. 9. The threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. 10. If you push a negative hard enough, it will push through and become a positive. All right? And so, would you say that that is advocating the overthrow of the government? Yes, it is. Have academics been prosecuted for the Smith Act since the 1950s for pushing destructive methods against positive methods in the institutions of learning of the younger generations? Can you see how this has affected our society today, where riots and looting seem to be what the kids are able to come up with as a method for solving problems? Okay. And where is the Justice Department? That's really a good question, because apparently those same kids that learned these same methods have weaponized and infiltrated into the mid-level bureaucratic positions, the long-lived positions in the Department of Justice, the FBI, the CIA, the DEA, and so on and so forth, so that when those people run into these activities like protection rackets and treachery and sedition and secrecy and blasphemy, they seem perfectly fine to them. They don't see these activities as comprising any form of overthrow of the government. And so what we come up with as a generalization about what's going on with the church, the globalists, and education is they have set aside the morality of the actual covenants of the Old Testament and New Testament, and they've embraced the ethic of imperial globalism, which includes from the Quran, taqiyya, jizya, jihad, blasphemy, and other things, as part of just doing business. Okay, and this has played out in the treaties, the trade treaties that are passing back and forth between the nations, in which there are no human rights, there are no civil rights, there are no rights for being alive at all. We humans are considered chattel, cattle, or consumable products, and they make sure that we think that way. All right. We have a civil society down at the bottom line, which is no longer civil. It is no longer based on consent of the governed. It is no longer based on honest elections. There are 63 ways to meddle in elections, and with the internet in place, whole governments can meddle in each other's elections by trolling and editorializing on each other's media. Okay, we just have to be aware of this. In the midst of this turnover from wisdom to renegade, I don't know, mercenary behavior, we each are still a soul. We are a soul in a universe in which the creative force or God or intelligence has laws that work predictably. Okay, throw something up, it comes down. Add 2 and 2 together, and you get 4. All right, the sacred geometry is repeatable. Nature is repeatable. Nature is reliable. But human society has walked away from being predictable and reliable and in principle with wisdom, and has embraced lawlessness, treachery, fraud, and all of that. But we're still souls. And so what this gives us an opportunity to do is to learn how to prepare and defend ourselves, our souls, and the souls of our children against what happened to Lyra. What happened to Lyra was all the people were just like this. They were honest, they were truth-telling, they were sincere, they worked very hard, they were diligent, they were constant, they had fidelity, they were loyal, all these good things. And then the Draconi showed up and ate them. All right, so we are in a world, we are still souls of the true Almighty God, and we are in a world that is corrupted to the max. And we are here to learn how to deal with it. All right, and we do have some resources with which to deal with it. And we can be very skeptical about everything that the officials tell us about anything. Okay? Tell us about anything. Let's talk about the whole COVID scam. Okay? And the number of false positives involved in the COVID scam. Whereas the media allege that 200,000 people have died from the COVID-19 virus, okay, CDC concedes that the number of people who actually died from the virus and the virus alone was less than 10,000, okay. But that doesn't get into the mainstream media very often, okay. According to the New York Times, potentially 90% of those who have tested positive for COVID-19 have such insignificant amounts of the virus present in their bodies that such individuals do not need to isolate, nor are they candidates for contact tracing. Leading public health experts are now concerned that overtesting is responsible for misdiagnosing a large number of people with harmless amounts of virus in their systems. And I can attest to this because of the long and detailed testimony by Judy Mikovits, the biochemist, and George Webb, okay, who explained that the test isolates exosomes, not immune responses, and exosomes can be caused by many causes. Any form of dehydration will cause exosomes, and that includes glyphosate, the flu, a cold. You could have COPD or anemia or allergies or asthma. In my case, I have porphyria. Okay, there are some of us with chronic pulmonary blood problems that will always test positive. even though we've never been around the COVID-19. All right. So most of these people are not likely to be contagious, says the New York Times. This is an article by John Rappaport from September the 1st. Okay. In 3 sets of testing data compiled by officials in Massachusetts, New York, and Nevada, up to 90% of people testing positive carried barely any virus. Okay. It's a lot worse than the Times admits. The rabbit hole goes much deeper. The issue appears to be the ballooning insensitivity of the test. It's so sensitive that it picks up inconsequential tiny amounts of virus that couldn't harm a flea and calls this positive. Therefore, millions of people labeled positive infected who carry very little virus such that no harm would come to them or anyone else comes in contact have been labeled as positive, and that's why everybody is commanded to wear these masks, which CDC says are dangerous, and stay 6 feet apart in order to shut down the economy. And what has become clear is that the entire COVID-19 adventure has been planned by the guys at CDC. Robert Redfield was involved in Fort Detrick, Maryland, in the development of all the diseases going back to 1983 with Tony Fauci, you know, the HIV and the H1N1 and the swine flu and the, you know, SARS and Ebola. They developed all those diseases. What for? Because they have patents on the diseases, and they get a vaccine that kills off the disease, and then they have a product. It's called protection racketeering. Okay, it's a protection racket. That's how they make money, just as the people who call themselves neocons insist that we need to find enemies and go to more wars because it costs money to develop armaments and keep logistics networks operating. You've got to have money in order to create wars, in order to create a war economy. That's where we are now. Okay. All right. So it's easy to say that you shouldn't believe everything you hear. All right. But there are other issues that aren't spoken of that I speak of. Okay. And one of them, of course, for me is the life out there versus human absolute sovereignty. You know, if you notice, National Reconnaissance Office and NSA and NASA operate from the premise that this life is all there is, and maybe someday we'll discover life somewhere else. All right. Well, a couple years ago, I ran into a book that had been published by Lawrence Spence, which are the personal notes and interview transcriptions of Matilda O'Donnell McElroy. And she simply merely interviewed an alien back in 1947. She interviewed an alien. And the alien and McElroy were able to create and arrive at a process of communication so that he could explain things to her and she could ask him questions. And so when I read the alien's interpretation of our history, I realized that our history is part of the official dogma that we need to be skeptical about, because the introduction of a couple thousand aliens into our world back in the 14th century was followed by and corroborates with the whole Renaissance and transformation of human society that happened during the Renaissance, because they were some fabulous minds that came here. That also corroborates with Flat Earth British and the mud flood guys, who have shown us that the pictorial histories that we have received, the official history, for instance, of San Francisco, is totally wacko. Here, this is one. Tonic water, it's got quinine in it. Yeah, Martin Liedeke yesterday showed up with something that just blew me away. Well, you know, New Earth with Sylvia shows us the stone technologies that are all over Siberia and how they compare to the stone technologies in Bolivia and Egypt. Okay. But what Martin dug up was a book that showed the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco. And there are these panorama, you know, it's a large book, and the picture stretches across both pages of the book. And here's San Francisco after the earthquake, and it's devastated. It looks like Berlin after World War II. There's nothing standing. And I thought, that's odd. How can that be? How can the 1906 earthquake totally destroy the city? It's only 1915, 9 years later, when the Great Pacific Exposition was held in San Francisco. And I've already bought the book that shows the panorama of the Pan-Pacific Exposition and how the city of San Francisco is intact and in perfect condition 9 years after being totally devastated by the 1906 earthquake. Does not compute. Okay, does not compute. And so we have reason to believe not only is the no life but here story, the official story, not true, but the history we have, hit story, is not true. The COVID story that they're giving us is not true. And what happens here to truth tellers is really kind of horrific, actually. And this is MSTMHA on WordPress. Category archives the untimely deaths in the realm of targeted individuals. And I left you the link for that as well, you see. All right, because in the imperial commercial model of empire, which the New World Order is, which is based on Masonic rules for secrecy, and in the Masonic order, if you talk out of turn, they kill you. All right. And so on my Facebook, in my Facebook pages, I have a page called Departed Martyrs. And I've been putting up and keeping track of the number of people who have been off and suicided and heart attacked and poisoned and so on. Martyrs for telling the truth. And so if the New World Order were ever to take hold, telling the truth would become a crime punishable by death. Because what I'm getting to with this sequence, going from discipline to discipline to discipline to discipline, and showing you how each discipline has compromised accepting a doctrine or a dogma and pushing aside the truth tellers and allowing treachery and protection rackets and sedition and blasphemy. There's nothing true that we get. But that's no reason to be upset. Because remember, we're a soul inhabiting a body. And the soul has access to much more information than the official sources limit themselves to. And that's the whole purpose and reason for this situation to have come into being. You see, God is a God of reasons. And this situation has come into being in order to teach the truth tellers and the people of integrity who follow the ethic of Jesus Christ and who follow the holy laws of God how to deal with treachery, protection rackets, sedition, blasphemy, child sex trafficking, and the whole lot. That's what we're here to do as reverent, honorable, truthful, sincere people. We are here to learn how to deal with people who are satanic, or people who are Luciferian, people who are demonized, people who are insane. We are here, and God holds us together, holds our consciousness together, much like John Bunyan, just like his experience day to day with issue by issue by issue in the charismatic model. We are here to learn how to protect the communities of one purse who adopt the progressive methods of conflict analysis and resolution and mediation, arbitration, conciliation. We are learning how to protect ourselves, is what we are doing here. And so there's no reason to be fatalistic. There's no reason to be down in the dumps. We have a challenge now. And we are coming up to the very climax of that challenge, because our very leadership, our leader who does believe in the morality and ethos of the Hebrew scriptures, and who lives by it to the extent that he is able, just as many others do, is in hospital today. And he is subject to the doctors who work by doctrine and dogma. It makes me really uncomfortable. But anyway, we have no reason to despair, because we are being challenged and not defeated. Keep in attunement with your soul and ask for direction every day, and give thanks for every bit of wisdom that is gifted to you to enable you to meet the next challenge and the next and the next. This is boot camp, baby. We're in Christian boot camp, and we're going to make it, and you will too. And so, yes, the landscape looks devastated, but underneath it all, a new beginning is going to occur, because that's what the book of Revelation is about. When things get too bad, there's another reset. And according to Native American lore, there have been 5 resets. I can't testify to what is actually true about it, but we'll see, and we'll get through this, and we're going to learn how to confront and defeat the Satanists, the Luciferians, the globalists, the communists, the socialists. You see, the socialists want to impose their paradigm on everybody, whereas the Christian communities of one purse have a community in which their socialism is only among and for themselves, and they take care of themselves and they protect themselves. That's where we're going. We're going to make it. Hey, Steve, you ready?
I'm here.
Good. Well, I'm done for today, and I hope I made some sense.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to go back to Facebook, and we'll talk there, and I'll see you later. Okay, sweetie?
All right.
Okay, bye-bye. All right. He's gone. There we are. All right, so yes, everything's bad. But we are souls, and we're going to get through this. That's what we're here for. It's a challenge. And I'm keeping our president in my prayers, and all of you who are my subscribers and friends, keep all of you in my prayers. And remember, we have to attune and attend every moment to what we're doing and be careful. I'll see you guys later.